Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers Podcast. I am Jody Grunwald. This week, my guest is Kimberly Kravitz, an Emmy Award winning anchor and producer. Kimberly developed a passion for television at a very young age. Although it's not an easy industry to break into, she grew a thick skin and worked hard. Over her decade spent in the television and entertainment industry, Kimberly won 2 New York Emmys for her excellence in storytelling and production. Since winning her Emmys, she has helped other colleagues and youngsters who are breaking out into the field and has opened a consulting business for journalists who are just starting out. You can now find Kimberly working for News 12 New Jersey. We talk about taking chances and so much more. Listen in. Please subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel. Stream this podcast on all streaming sites. Reviews and shares are always welcomed and help us to be heard. Like us on Facebook and Instagram by going to Today is the Day, Live It. To learn more about Today is the Day consulting and coaching services and the new Today is the Day Changemakers Connective, go to todayisthedayliveit.com. Sign up for our mailing list to be notified when new events and networking opportunities become available. Also, I am the CEO and co-founder of the Zach G. Applauder Kids Foundation. To learn more about how the organization is connecting children with a financial need to an ongoing creative outlet, go to applaudourkids.org. The views expressed by all Today's the Day Changemakers podcast guests are their own. Their appearance on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast does not imply any endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and as I say every single week, I have the opportunity and the honor of interviewing the changemakers, the inspirers, and those who are disrupting the status quo in the most positive way possible in their corner of the world and beyond. And today I have Kimberly Kravitz with me. Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
Hi, Jody. I'm great. Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year. I'm so happy to have you on. We have met in other realms and other things, and finally we're going to sit down and have a conversation.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to it.
Me too. So what I'm going to do is what I do on every podcast, just a little bit about your bio, and then we're going to get into our conversation here, okay? Kimberly Kravitz is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and producer who developed a passion for TV at a very young age. Over a decade, she has spent in TV and entertainment industry, and Kimberly won 2 New York Emmys for her excellence in storytelling and production. Congratulations, Kim. That's amazing. Earlier last year, Kimberly started a consulting business for journalists who are just starting out. In her spare time, she also loves to volunteer her time for organizations such as 9/11 Empty Sky Foundation, the fight against ALS, which we will be talking about, and of course, very important, the Girl Scouts as well. And you can now see Kimberly working for News 12, which is so awesome to see you on News 12. So kudos to you on all the many things that you are doing.
Thank you, Jody. Wow. What a great way to start the year. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And so I want to learn more about you and all the wonderful things that you're doing. So let's go back in time a little bit, like I do with all my guests, and talk to me about where you grew up.
Sure. Oh, that's a great question. So I guess we'll start with high school because no one really needs to know anything right beyond that. I'm 31 now. So I'm a family of 4. It's my sister Ashley, younger sister, and my mom and my dad. They decided to pull us out of Old Bridge and move us to Freehold. So I went to Freehold Township High School, represent, and I loved it. Not my favorite years, I'll be quite honest. You're just learning a little bit about yourself. It's tough. I would never want to go back to the high school years. But then I moved to Monmouth University when it was time to graduate, and Monmouth University has been superb, and I feel like I never left because you always have to give a hand back. And I have felt they pulled me so much forward into the direction I wanted to go in. So that's where I'm from. I've always been a Jersey gal, even though I have the Brooklyn roots.
And that's what I love. We have that in common. So your family is from Brooklyn. So that's definitely, so Brooklyn's representing too here as well. But I want to go back to what you said, because I think it's really important, especially if there are young people listening to this podcast, because that does happen as well. You mentioned something with high school being a tougher time, and it's when you're just getting to know yourself a little better. If you could talk to your younger self, knowing what you know now, like you said, you gave your age 31, what would be a message you'd share? And I ask you that because if there is a young person listening, what would be a message they might need to hear?
What I would tell my younger self is, it will all be okay, and it will be more than okay. I have to say that, let's say 15, 16 years old, it's scary. I moved from a few towns over to a brand new school. High school is huge. You don't know anyone. You're just another unfamiliar face and nobody really knows you. You don't even know who you are. So it wasn't until I feel I came into my own when I was in college and I started to just kind of know my brand, know who I was, and you need to be a leader, not a follower. That's really it, because you are so, at a young age, you're so vulnerable and you could be pulled into so many different directions. So my message is it will all be okay. And it definitely gets better.
Yeah. And I know it's hard when you're in the muck of it to realize that it gets better. I moved to 3 different high schools in 4 years, so I know exactly what that's like. And I think that there's a lot of what happens in the world, the judgment plays a major role on our psyche. And that's as a kid, I think you're 100% right. It will get better. And it's about finding out who you are and finding your inner strength for sure. And then knowing that eventually you go to college and move on and learn from other people. But for those listening who may be in that situation, find a mentor. I feel like that's one of the most important things, especially at a young age as well.
Yes. And one thing I will say is that there's nothing better than like even recently, I was in my kitchen, making dinner, having a blast with my fiance, and my phone rings and I pick up because I never know who's on the other line. And it was a student that I went to high school with, who I haven't spoken to in 15 years and almost 15 years. And he just called and lit up my life because he was like, Kim, I just want to let you know, I see you. I see what you're doing. I see you're giving back. You're helping younger students now, and good job. And then we connected and it was like, okay, well, how are you doing, Brian? And, it was just the dialogue that came from like left field, and it just is that full circle moment. So I figured, just to really show how much has changed since high school.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, without a doubt. It's like you don't think you can, like you said, it's going to be okay. It's just you can't see that much in the future to know how it's going to feel when it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us about how you decided that going into journalism was something that was so important to you. When did that happen for you?
So mine's a little like a little bit of a different kind of story. Most people just say, oh, they woke up and they wanted to be Barbara Walters or Oprah Winfrey. And to me, that didn't come until later on. I wanted to be a teacher. That's why I went to Monmouth University, because you have so many fabulous teachers graduating from that school. But then what happened was, during my first semester in college, I sat with my guidance counselor. I think that was who it was. And they sat down. It was the day before Thanksgiving break. And they said, you're going to school to be a teacher, but I could tell you have this other, like, these qualities about you. And then I started to really like look back to who I was even as an infant. Like, I'd be talking to people and asking questions since I'm in the baby stroller. So literally, like, my parents would be like bringing me out as a little girl, and I'd always be like, oh, what do you do for a living? Where's your husband? I'd ask all these questions like a little curious cat. And it wasn't until I really sat down with my guidance counselor who said, you might want to entertain the idea of going on, a different path to journalism, and, finding your internships and trying it out and see if that's a good fit. And that is exactly what happened.
Wow, look at
It
that.
was a fit. It was a fit.
So I say this all the time. One person gave you a little insight and it flipped the switch for you on your entire life now, right?
Yes, I owe it all to my guidance counselor. And it, like the first semester of your freshman year of college, I guess you're pretty malleable. But you know what they suggest? They say get involved in those clubs, right? So like there's radio, there's yearbook, there's TV, print. I tried it all out during my downtime and I loved it. That's how I knew this was like, okay, I want to do it all. There's no limits on what you can do. And that's like where like that whole, like, it was like the awakening of like when I realized what I wanted to do.
Wow. So then once you graduated from college, and that all happened for you at Monmouth, right?
It all happened at Monmouth.
And then once so then where did your career lead you right out of school?
Yeah, so this is like a very integral part right here. So those internships are a must. So when you're in your junior year, you're allowed to now go into the real world, and you have to apply to those internships. So like you reach for the stars. So I worked with ABC 7 for Eyewitness News. I've been watching that forever. I interned there. Fox 5 and Mine 9 did another internship. So those 2 years occupied my time. They both led me to freelance producing opportunities. So those connections, and especially you're working for nothing. You're waking up early, you're going into the city, you're working 10-hour days. You're not making it a dime. In fact, you're spending money. But you know what? When you wake up and go to work and you love it that much, that's when you realize, of course, I want to do this for a living. So that's really how you can transition from that to a full-time job in this field.
That's amazing. And you said so freelance work. So tell us a little bit about what that means for those who may not understand.
Great question. So sometimes, well, it's actually, there's two different paths that we see. So there's freelance, where usually you're not like an all-in 40 hours a week with a company. It's not like you're indebted to the one company. That's what I did to start before I got my first full-time job when I was out of college. But the path that most take in journalism, every one of my friends, they pack their bags, they go to a small market, whether it be Biloxi, Nebraska, South Dakota. They go to the middle of nowhere, they uproot themselves, and they find their first job. It's like chicken or the egg, Jody. You cannot get that dream job without having another thing to show for it. You need to build that demo reel somewhere. And no one's going to take a chance on a new student unless they move to a smaller market. I didn't do that. I made my mistakes at a brand new startup station who took a chance on me in 2014 when I graduated, right here in New Jersey. So I really owe so much of it to them. That was my job at Me TV.
That's amazing. Wow. It's great. You didn't have, and I do hear that from others who say they had to pack up and go to a small place, in the middle of like massive snowdom all over the place. And you have reporting in the freezing cold. And so now talk to us about the type of journalist you are, and also producer, what you produce, so that we can have a little bit more of an understanding of what you do.
Yes. So, and I'll bring it right back to Me TV, because that is where I got the job. They took a chance on me in 2014. They hired me as a promotions assistant, and I never did a day of it. Okay. We did everything on our own. It was a small staff. So they basically promoted me like each year. It was like, okay, you're going to be a production assistant. Then you're going to be a production coordinator and booking. And then next thing you know, you're producing the whole damn show on your own. Like, it was really like they gave me they brought it to the table, and I just was there to eat it up. So what kind of producer am I? I try to be thought-provoking. I try to stick to what the current events are, right? We have so much happening in New Jersey, but we have so much going on in the country. So you have to be up to date on what's going on. And also you have to find those change makers. You have to find those people that make news, the movers and shakers. And what happens is you meet people over the years. It goes by really fast. And you may have one person on your show back in like 10 years ago, but they'll remember you. And that contact will kind of go with you as you go on with your career. And you never know, like that's where if you need someone, you might tap into that Rolodex and say, oh my God, this guy was great on foreclosures, or this guy was great on vaccinations. And it's just, you got to have like a lot of space up there, because it's just one after the next. Producing is like another beast, but it makes you a great journalist.
Which do you prefer?
So my dream was to be a journalist in every aspect. Like, I love producing, I love TV, I love radio, I love print. Journalist means so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
You have to kind of love it all. But, I love, like, I just had my first chance to anchor last week at News 12. It was a different beast. And, versus my last station, it was very different. And I just loved it. So my dreams just keep expanding, because I love reporting. I love anchoring. I like shooting and editing and producing. So it's kind of like I'm someone that really likes a lot of things in this field, and it might get tricky to explain,
Yeah,
because there's not much. Yeah.
That's great though, that you like everything.
Yeah, and there's definitely days that things get boring. It's good to shake it up.
So you've interviewed a lot of people. You've been in front of a lot of people, and I'm sure you get asked this question all the time because everybody wants to know. So some of your favorite interviews.
So I have one that went viral. I'll tell you about that. So I had a really funny experience with Chris Christie. we all know Chris Christie and his antics and his behavior, but I'll start with this one. So I was young. I was like, it was 2016, and it was the presidential, the Republican conventions. So we went to the Republican in Cleveland, and then the next week we went to the Democratic in Philly. And my goal for the day was to not leave there without getting the microphone in front of Chris Christie, like myself. So I made it happen, and I stuck that microphone right in his face. I chased after him after like a 15-hour day, and I knew he could be very rude and very curt, but he did give me the chance. And I asked him the question, do you think, what are the chances that Donald Trump will run and win the presidency? So I asked him that question, and another journalist who is a beautiful female, I think she worked for Telemundo, gorgeous, and she's like competing for the time. And I felt bad because I'm not like an aggressive, like get my mic in the air like this. But what happened was I had my question asked, and he yelled at the beautiful Latina reporter and said, he turns his head around and he basically said, excuse me, do you see I'm talking to her right now? And it was one of the craziest moments because it made me realize that, hell yeah, I got my interview with Chris Christie, and we actually spoke more than once during the convention. So that made me feel really good about that moment. He's a trip though. Like he's the type, we don't need to get into him, but he's unbelievable. I've also had some really cool interviews. I hosted the New Jersey Hall of Fame each year. So, oh my God, like I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, and I met Jason Alexander. He was so great. I've had the chance to meet Maury Povich and his wife, Michael Bolton, who I've been listening to forever. I mean, the list goes on. Dick Vitale. I mean, all these people, Mariano Rivera. I mean, there's just so many people that are like, you have like, like the heart starts beating, the adrenaline, but then you just realize they're just freaking like you.
They are. I know. And when we're younger, we get this, the whole stardom thing. I don't no longer. I've met a lot of celebrities myself, and I do not get that feeling like they're different. It's just like, wait a minute, that is the person I've heard on the radio. Like that's the moment for a second, and then it just kind of, you have a conversation with them, and it's very normal, which is awesome, which is the way it's supposed to be. We're all humans.
The other thing is, if you're meeting them on the street, I may feel starstruck, but if I'm like working on a red carpet and I'm there for a reason, it definitely is like, okay, a reminder, you're supposed to be here and ask the questions. But if it's like a, oh my God moment where you're on the street and you're like, Mike Piazza's there, like I'll lose my mind.
Yeah, exactly. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. I passed by Mario Lopez on the street in New York by chance, and I did have that moment for a second. You're like,
he's unbelievable. I would have that moment too.
So, it's kind of like you have a second, but they're really just regular people. Ham 10 is a leader in IT enterprise solutions and staffing. They are driven to transform their clients' business performances. They do this every day by providing their clients with the best services and products like BizLego, an online community platform, and Colear, a unique learning management system. They also transform the lives of women and children through their associated nonprofits, SheTech, which supports women in and joining the technology field, and Sofkin, support organization for kids in need. Ham 10, technology for social good. Go to pam10.com for more information. You won 2 Emmys. So tell us about how that all came about. That's incredible, Kimberly.
Well, thank you. So this was a tougher one. So like it's not all like fun and games. That we actually had decided as a small station to do a town hall on the heroin crisis. So what we did was we had this like kind of like everlasting relationship with Monmouth University, and we hosted it there, and we had 500 people in a live audience, and we had Larry Menzi was our host, who's amazing. Like I learned so much from him. We should definitely talk about him at some point later because he's just been so integral. But he hosts the the live event. It's a few hours long, and I was production manager. So basically it's getting the moms and dads that lost their children. It's the moms and dads that had their children almost nearly die, and then Narcan saved them. We've had doctors on that have saved people. We've had doctors on that prevented a death. And what happened was Jody, this is crazy. During the live event, someone had a reaction in the audience, I guess, talking about heroin and all of these very uncomfortable conversations, and they had a seizure in the audience. So it was a very scary moment. And luckily it was like, is there a doctor in the house? Yeah, there's a doctor in the house, thank God. And they were able to rectify the situation, make sure that person was safe and healthy, and we were able to move on with the show. But this is all true. I mean, it was like, when they say whatever can go wrong will go wrong, that's what happened. And we ended up with Emmy Awards. You apply for them, you submit your, you have a submission. We put it in and we won in New York and the Mid-Atlantic. So that's where the Emmys came from. And it reminds me every day of just crazy times. I mean, it was really like, it was the hardest interviews we've had to do.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations to you for the award, but also for sharing the important stories, right? Because there's so many important stories to share. And some of them are heart-wrenching and I can imagine very difficult to share. Has that come up for you? I mean, I understand what you were talking about the opioid crisis, but have you dealt with that a lot I wonder sometimes how journalists do it as they're reporting about murders and things that are happening. And I don't know how do you get to that space?
Jody, Monday night, okay, we're talking less than like 72 hours ago. I had the most horrific scenario. I'm just going to tell you what happened. So it was a Monday night. Everyone's observing New Year's Day. So I'm working and it's like a skeleton crew. There's no one on and the news is pretty light for the day. So we were doing a story on toll hikes. All right, no problem. We get a call that I'm being moved to a breaking news story out of Neptune. And it's a homicide. So I'm already like, I'm not really sure I really want to be going there. But what do you do, right? So my camera guy, Matt Nash, we end up going to Neptune. And there's a whole crime scene. So we're there and I'm like uncomfortable. But I spoke to the neighbors. I spoke to the detectives, the prosecutor. And I'm supposed to be going live with something at 10 o'clock. And that something is basically, it's unanswered questions because I don't really know anything yet. They're investigating. So basically, in short, Jody, my back's up against this crime tape and the lights are going, there's sirens and everything. And I'm like really nervous because I see a group of people next to me. And I'm like, I know in my heart that the second I go live, which is not easy, they're going to come running into the shot. And I know I'm going to be startled because what if they're, armed or whatever. And Jody, hand to God, it's 10:01. My live shot starts. I hear the commotion behind me. And I'm like, oh my God, what is about to happen on live TV? Do they have a gun? What is going on? And I'm not armed. I'm defenseless. I'm a reporter out in the field. It turns out that even though my heart dropped and someone ran through crime tape, it was because the body was being brought out of the home. So someone ran after, knowing that I guess it was their loved one that was in the house being taken out. And that is exactly what happened at the 10 o'clock live shot. And it's like, you know what? Thank God it wasn't something concerning where it could have harmed us. But at the same time, that's a tough story. That's someone losing their loved one and then being dragged out of the house and me having to report on it. So that's just something that comes with the territory. And not all days are bad, but that was a very scary, I've got my family watching TV. I've got the producers watching the TV and they're like, what is going on with Kimmy right now? What is happening? And nobody felt good about that.
Yeah, I'm sure in your face, those that knew you were like, something's happening right now. And and it's scary. I give you a lot of credit because that's hard. You're physically there. It's not like you're reporting from the studio, which is a whole different feeling and everything, but still heart-wrenching to talk about a murder or anything like that. That's really hard.
Yeah, but you know what? I have a great team at News 12 and they, my news director called me the next day and was like, listen, are you okay? Do you need to talk? We have counseling, and I was really proud of the way they handled that because normally most news outlets are known for, you got to get the story, but this place, they're about safety first.
Yeah. And that's wonderful that you have that with them, and that they are all about that. I know so many people from News 12. Della Cruz has been part of our Applaud Our Kids Foundation, has been featured on her spotlight, and so I'm Ivy Sharmas used to be there, and all of that. So I love working with them. And so you talk about in your bio, we had talked about, or I had mentioned that you do, work with fundraising or bringing awareness to ALS. And you and I talked a little bit offline about the fact that my father passed away from ALS. It's one of the most difficult diseases to watch somebody go through. A doctor walks in the room to give you that diagnosis. It is a tough one, because there's really, after all these years, nothing that they can do. And I found out from you that you also have dealt with this in your own family. So share a little bit about what you do for the ALS organization.
Sure. So it is, and I'm so sorry about your dad. That is just not easy. And it wasn't. I can't speak to like I wasn't a caretaker. It was someone that we saw. Our cousin Beth, who is, I would say, about like 60 years old and so full of life and funny. And we saw her slow decline, and the way her daughter helped. Basically, she at one point had a computer where she had to type to us how she, that was her way of communicating. So when she passed, it was devastating. And I have a friend who does the ALS Valentine's Plunge each year for her dad in his memory. And it's great. And that's called Chaz's Steelers. So every February, it's just a few weeks away. I hope we have 70-degree weather again. We go out and we promote, this ALS awareness. And I think it's a great way to, to celebrate a Valentine's Day weekend, because it's just, for the loved ones who unfortunately were with this debilitating disease.
Yeah, it's actually quite rare and unfortunate, and I know that it's difficult. It is very difficult to watch somebody go through it. So yes, thank you for the work that you do for that. And then you also work with, what do you do with the Girl Scouts? That must be fun and exciting.
I love the Girl Scouts. So I've been doing so much with them over the years. So it started with their cute Girl Scout cookie competition a few years ago. David Burke and I are good friends, and he does he's one of the judges for the Girl Scout competition. And they have, how in Jersey we have like amazing restaurants. They pick out a bunch of foodies, influencers, and chefs, and they are on a stage and they host. It's like they have to judge a dessert based on a Girl Scout cookie. So I've emceed that the last couple of years, even during COVID. It was amazing. And recently I won an award for the Girl Scouts, and it was like I got even closer with them. And it was, I guess it's the top phenomenal women under 40. And I cannot wait to nominate my sister next year, because she's so phenomenal. And that's honestly, it's a great, Girl Scouts are amazing. And the Jersey Shore branch are so dynamic and so cutting edge. And that's what we need.
Absolutely. I've been to their gala. We work with them with Applaud Our Kids. They're a wonderful organization doing great things. So that's great. And congratulations on yet another award that you've won.
That one really made me feel so special, though. That was a good one. That was a really good one. They're wonderful.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a nice feeling to be recognized for the things that you do and the work that you're doing, for sure. And that's why you're a change maker, right? Those who are going out and doing things and working with other organizations and in the work you do, by sharing those important stories and pulling out the important information so the rest of us can know what's going on in the world. Really very, very important.
Thank you.
So now you also had one other organization that I'm not familiar with. It was the 9/11 organization. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So in 9/11, it's a beautiful space. The Empty Sky Foundation is right across the river. It's in Jersey City. And basically what they have, it's gorgeous. And I should show you a picture. It's two walls parallel, the same amount of distance as the Twin Towers were to one another. So they basically did a model of the Twin Towers, where if you come out looking at it, it looks like two Twin Towers, but they're walls covered in those who passed on 9/11. So I've been out there almost every year at my last two jobs, and you just go and you meet with the people that show up there, And, they're all there for, unfortunately, the same reason. They lost a loved one during 9/11. And I met with the founders of that foundation, and they do a 5K each year in Liberty State Park, and they're wonderful women. But those are two women that are now widows. So it's honestly, it's another, we all remember where we were on 9/11. That's something. It's not a health condition. It's an event, a life event that we were all, we all went through as Americans. And I just love to be like representing on every year 9/11. It's just, you can't forget.
No, yeah, we all do remember where we were on that day. I also, when we went into lockdown, right? So now we have two within our timeline, two things that we all. I
Oh my
I want
God.
to remember something phenomenally good,
I know.
as a collective unit, which hopefully that'll happen in 2023. Something really good we can all be excited about. So what's next for you, Kim? I mean, you're a go-getter. You're just on the go consistently doing really, really great things. Is there something the ultimate for you?
It's my personal life. It's time, I mean, I waited so long to find the right guy, and I have the best partner. And we're getting married in 2023. Thrilled, so excited, and we're really excited to start a family, and that is what's next. I mean, I'm 31, right? Not a spring chicken anymore, and that's where I'm excited to take the professional life, and now it's time to build the personal and really make it where, that's what you're going to leave with. That's your legacy. So I'm really excited for that.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's one things that I know for myself. I wasn't extremely present. I always say that when I get to talk about this topic, when my kids were young, because I was very career driven, right? And I wanted to give them all the things I didn't have. So we overachieve at times. But for you to be able to, it's so wonderful for you to be able to say, now it's time for me. I know, you've put in the time. I'm sure you've put in countless hours as an intern, right? And it was, you just kind of go from one day to the next. So how are you planning on phasing between the two now? Like, how are you juggling and balancing the career and the private life?
It's a great question, but it's actually, thank God for my mom, that is such, like, we call her the momager, because she's always looking at an outsider in, and kind of like, she's a huge supporter and cheerleader of what I do. And what I've been doing, my station sold MeTV 1 year ago today. So when that happened, it was like, oh my God, everything I know and love is disappearing. But what happened was, Jody, it gave me an opportunity to begin my own company. So now I'm able to work with so many different companies on my own schedule. So even with News 12, like, I have a really good thing going where I can kind of put in the hours that I really would like to. And I'm grinding it out and I'm hustling, but at least I could reel it back when it's time to really start focusing on, like, a maternity leave one day, or raising my children. And you need the partner that's so supportive in it, in it as well. So that is how I'm going to do it. I'll continue with my own business. And I think it's really important to kind of know, like, this is kind of the amount of time you're going to dedicate to your profession. And this is the time you're going to dedicate to your family.
Absolutely. And let's talk about your consulting business for a minute, because I love what I said in the beginning with your bio about helping those who are starting out in the business. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So it dawned on me last year that there have been so many students, not just from Monmouth, but students from everywhere, that have connected with me. And they asked me, do you mind looking at my tape? Do you mind looking at my resume? How did you get into what you do? And honestly, I don't believe I would have been anywhere near here if I didn't have, someone to lean on, like my mentors over the years. If I didn't have these professionals in my ear telling me, like, oh, the money will come, that's what they would say, or, just try it out, or make sure you get out there on a random snowy day and tape yourself doing a live shot. Like, all these silly, quirky bits of advice. If I didn't hear that, I wouldn't be where I am. So it's time for me to give back. I want the students to know that it's not an easy, ride. You're going to have to really find your way and build your way up, but let me help you. Let's really sit and have a conversation. And you'll know really quick if it's not for you, but why quit on a dream that you don't even know if you have it in you? So I am encouraging any student that is excited by the field to reach out to me, and we'll have a consultation.
That's amazing because my niece, who just started college, is a freshman this year. She is going for political journalism.
There you
And
go.
so, so I don't know why I just, as you're saying that now, I definitely will connect Isabella with you. I think that would be fabulous. Is there a website or any way to reach out to you that you can share?
Yes, it is my name, www.kimberlyjkravitz.com.
Wonderful. So that's great. And you're also on Instagram, I believe, as well, right?
Yeah, that's my name, Kimberly Kravitz TV.
That's awesome. So I'm going to ask you the last question. It's the new question for this year. Every year I ask the same question of all of my guests. But the more I was thinking about wanting to talk to younger change makers, there's a lot of them out there trying to change the world. I really wanted my change makers guests to give advice. So a lesson you have learned, right? So maybe something you haven't shared, so far on the podcast, a lesson you have learned either personally or professionally that somebody could take a nugget away from, whether they're a young change maker or someone who is seasoned. And just for all those listeners, while you're thinking of that we don't pre-plan this. I don't ask my guests this beforehand. It's something that I ask them on the fly so that it's something that really stands out to them.
So there's something that I would like to share that I felt was instrumental in who I am. So remember how I mentioned I have a younger sister? She's like my older sister, and she told me once years ago when I was starting to figure out where do I go in my professional life, and she said, Kim, you have to go out for Miss New Jersey. And it was the scariest thing I've ever done because I've never done pageants. I don't like to be judged on what I look like or a scholarship or what I've contributed to society. But the fact that my younger sister told me to do something that scared the living daylights out of me, and that you had to discipline yourself and prep and be coached for months. And when I did it, it was the best thing ever. And I felt like I walked out with 100 new friends, and you learn so much about yourself. So a little thing that I'd like to let people know is to take chances. And if you're not scared, you're probably not pushing yourself enough. And those moments where my sister told me to do Miss New Jersey, out of nowhere, and I listened, those moments changed, my life now, because those people have connected me to literally the job I have. It's all full circle. People that I've interviewed, people that have helped me along the way. It's just listen to the advice that others give you that really have their best interest at heart. And you would never know how your path would look different.
It's so funny how we're coming full circle, because we started out with you telling me about the guidance counselor who gave you the piece of information about why don't you look at journalism.
Exactly.
But I think the key to everything you just said is about being open.
Yes.
Instead of fighting against it and letting the fear and the, what ifs and should I take over, you're just allowed the flow to happen.
Yes. And I have so many friends that have gotten in and out of the field for whatever reason, maybe they just felt like they were done. They reached their goals and now it's on to something else. But we are still reinventing ourselves all the time, Jody. And I'm sure you feel the same way too. I mean, you're a mother, you're a professional, it's like you always want to take on something new each year. And I'm the exact same way. So I feel like you have to be open-minded and give the gift.
Yeah, absolutely. I am going to ask you one last thing, because you just talked about this, and I know I said that was the last question, so I kind of lied a little bit. Is that how have you seen journalism change and because of the world we're in right now, that came to me to want to ask you that question. How have you seen journalism change from when you started till now?
So there was that Megyn Kelly movie where about women in the workplace. It was as scary to see as you can imagine. I mean, being a woman in a male-dominated industry, not so much anymore, by the way, things have changed. And, I used to watch these shows and movies about how people would have to sneak their way to the top. Nothing like that would ever happen anymore. So I have to say, things changed, but not that long ago. I mean, I think it was, if I'm in this field 11 years, it probably had just changed and turned around for the better right before I started, because my God, you can't get away with saying boo anymore. HR will, they will take action, and they will not tolerate bullying. They will not tolerate sexual harassment. It's just got to be a very pleasant work environment. So that is definitely a big deal for me. It's a big deal for our future journalists, and that is something that I'm so glad is behind us.
Yeah, yeah. And we just lost an icon in Barbara Walters,
And
how did you feel when you heard about that?
I was crushed. And it's funny because I have the News 12 app on my phone. And when I heard it originally, somebody said to me, "Oh, that's a TikTok trend." I said, "Hold on a second." And I looked on my phone and it popped right up on the News 12 app. And I was crushed because she's just the trailblazer of all time. And she's someone that I don't ever like, even though she's lived through the decades of the tough journalism and maybe the sleeping around, I never put her in that category. She always stayed in her lane. She was such a professional, and she's celebrated.
She is. And so are you. And so are you. And so that's I'm just so glad that we're connected now and that I had an opportunity to chat with you. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Oh, and thank you for making me dig back a little bit on things I might have forgotten about. It's time to fight back.
That's what I feel like. That's my job, and that's what I seem to do when I interview people. And I love that I could bring out a little bit about everybody's past. We forget the little details sometimes. So Thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And congratulations on the new engagement and the soon-to-be wedding the end of this year. So lots of planning in play.
Yes, thank you so much. We are so thrilled.
Awesome. So I'm going to say what I say at the end of every single podcast. Today is the day you cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what small steps or large steps are you taking today to get yourself closer to your goals? Thank you so much, Kimberly Kravitz. I'm so happy you were part of this today. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.